Now, the US budget will be hit with $85 billion worth of cuts after President Obama and the Republican leadership failed to agree a deal before last night's deadline. Now, many economists fear that the squeeze could end up harming the economy. Well, let's talk to the US political commentator James D. Boyce, who's here with me. Good to see you, James.
Morning, Anna.
President Obama himself has called these cuts dumb and arbitrary. So why are they coming in?
Basically, they're coming in because in 2011, something called a super committee basically said, if you two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, can't sort things out, we will sort things out for you, and introduce a whole range of sweeping cuts. You might remember at Christmas, we were talking about the fiscal cliff. Those cuts were meant to come in then. At the fiscal cliff negotiations, at literally the last hour, the Vice President and the Senate Majority Leader struck a deal that kicked things down the line 3 months. That's where we are now, hence the cuts are coming in at this point, because neither side can get their act together.
And they've missed the deadline, they haven't reached a deal. So in the short term, who's going to suffer? Because these cuts were designed to hurt both sides, both Republican and Democrat areas of interest.
Actually, the people who will suffer most are those at the very bottom working for the federal government, because if you're going to introduce $1 trillion worth of tax cuts across the board with regard to spending, then you can't suddenly say, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Aircraft Carrier, you've got to go home. What you can cut, though, are the very people at the bottom who come to do contract work, cleaning, for example. So people who really need federal jobs most of all are probably the ones who suffer the most, I'm afraid.
But could there be a deal soon? I mean, could Republicans and Democrats come to some kind of compromise, given that they do have very different standpoints on how to tackle the deficit?
They do, and this is the great problem. You've got the Democrats who are saying we basically want to increase taxes, the Republicans who want to reduce spending. The Republicans are saying, hang on, in January we saw taxes go up as part of the fiscal cliff negotiations. Now it's time to talk about reducing spending. So both sides are sticking to their guns. The letters have gone out from the White House last night announcing these cuts to be introduced over the next 30 days. So it really is a question now of, high noon effectively, and, really seeing where public sympathy falls over the next 30 days.
Well, yes, and is there going to be much public sympathy at all? Because you can see the politicians engaging in the blame game,
Absolutely.
Both saying it's their fault you're in this situation, no, it's their fault we're in this situation. There's a sense amongst the public, surely, that the politicians care more about the politics than about the
You're absolutely
economic
right.
health.
We have a bizarre situation where the President of the United States is saying, kind of, don't blame me, Gov, I'm only the President. It's a lot easier, perhaps, for the White House to try and bring the troops together because the focus is on one individual. In the past, we've seen governments actually shut down. So Bill Clinton famously closed the government down in 1995 to stop this from happening. That, of course, led to his relationship with Monica Lewinsky, so that perhaps wasn't such a good move in the long run.
And what about from an international perspective? Everyone looking in, seeing how the US deals with its financial problems. It's not a great message, is it? And we're all so interlinked now globally and economically.
We are, and the problem is, of course, this doesn't just cast a shadow upon those people who will suffer directly, but it casts a shadow upon American standing in the world, because we look in and we say, there's no way you would want to run a business like this. Why on earth would you run a country like this?
James D. Boyce, very interesting to hear your views this morning. Thanks for joining.